The key wasn't just a piece of brass cut with precision. It was a symbol. To Julian Croft, it was a symbol of power. The key to his corner office, his kingdom in the sky. When he pressed that key into his mistress's palm, it was a secret promise, a key to the future he was building for them. He imagined her sneaking in for clandestine meetings, a thrilling secret kept within the steel and glass walls of the prestigious Hayes Tower. What Julian didn't know, what he couldn't possibly fathom, was that the key he so carelessly gave away didn't just open his office. It unlocked a truth that would shatter his world, because the name etched in the building's deed wasn't his. It was his pregnant wife's. Julian Croft believed in the gospel of hard work, but more than that, he believed in its rewards. His life was a testament to this belief. At 32, he was a senior vice president at Morgan & Finch Capital, a position he'd clawed his way to with ruthless efficiency and a smile that could disarm a hostile board. His reflection in the polished marble lobby of the Hayes Tower each morning was his daily affirmation, a man in a tailored Tom Ford suit with a Patek Philippe on his wrist and the world at his feet. The Hayes Tower wasn't just his office building. It was the epicenter of his ambition, a sleek, imposing monument of modern architecture that tore a hole in the Manhattan skyline. It represented everything he craved: status, wealth, and undeniable success. He felt a surge of pride every time he swiped his access card, a feeling of belonging among the city's elite. His home life was, in his estimation, just as perfect. He was married to Amelia Hayes. Sweet, gentle Amelia. He'd met her at a charity gala 3 years prior. She was a volunteer, unassuming in a simple but elegant dress, with a kindness in her eyes that felt like a sanctuary from his cutthroat world. He learned she was an orphan, raised by a guardian, and worked part-time at a local art gallery. He found her lack of ambition charming, a perfect counterbalance to his own. She was his peaceful harbor, the beautiful, supportive wife who managed their impeccable brownstone, prepared his meals, and admired his achievements without ever competing with them. Now she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. Julian was ecstatic. A son to carry the Croft name, a legacy. He'd already started a trust fund. Another late night, honey. Amelia's voice, soft as cashmere, greeted him as he walked through the door one Tuesday evening. The aroma of rosemary and roasted chicken filled the air. He loosened his tie, dropping his briefcase by the door. Massive deal on the horizon, Ames. The kind that makes careers. You wouldn't understand the pressure. He meant it affectionately, but the condescension was a constant, subtle hum beneath his words. Amelia simply smiled, placing a hand on her swelling belly. Well, your son and I are proud of you. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself. He kissed her forehead, the gesture more habit than passion. Always. It's all for you two, you know. But recently, all for you two had begun to feel like a lie even to him. The lie had a name: Isabella Rossi. Isabella was a new analyst on his team. She was everything Amelia wasn't: sharp-edged, ferociously ambitious, with a fire in her eyes that mirrored his own. She didn't look at him with gentle admiration. She looked at him with a hunger that he found intoxicating. Their conversations started with market analyses and earnings reports, but soon bled into late-night drinks under the guise of strategy sessions. Isabella understood his world. She spoke his language of leverage, of acquisitions, of killer instincts. She saw the version of Julian he wanted to be, not the husband Amelia saw. "You're wasted on them, Julian," Isabella had whispered to him last week, her fingers tracing the lapel of his jacket in a dark corner of a bar. "The partners at this firm are dinosaurs. You should be running your own fund. You have the vision." He'd felt a jolt, a dangerous thrill. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Amelia supported him, but Isabella challenged him. She ignited a part of him that his comfortable life had dulled. The affair started as most do in a moment of weakness that felt like a moment of strength. A late night at the office, a shared bottle of expensive scotch, and a heated kiss against the cold glass of his office window. The city lights sprawling beneath them like a conquered kingdom. It was thrillingly reckless. He felt alive, reborn. The guilt was a dull ache, easily silenced by the roar of his ego. An ego Isabella stroked with expert precision. He started working later, his excuses becoming more elaborate. Amelia, trusting and preoccupied with the coming baby, seemed to notice nothing. Her innocence only made the deception easier. "I wish we had more time." Isabella sighed one evening, lying beside him in the sterile, impersonal room of a luxury hotel. "I hate having to sneak around." Julian, filled with post-coital confidence, felt a surge of possessiveness. He wanted to give her something, a token of their secret world. He thought of his office, his sanctuary in the Hayes Tower. It was their place, the place their affair had begun. It felt right. "I have an idea," he said, a slow, arrogant smile spreading across his face. "Something to make things a little easier, a little more ours." The following week, the weight of the freshly cut key in Julian's pocket felt like a tangible secret. It was a standard office key, but to him it was a declaration. He ran his thumb over its serrated edge. The cold metal, a stark contrast to the warmth of his plan. He was giving Isabella access not just to a room, but to his world, his power. It was an act of supreme confidence, the ultimate gesture of a man who believed he was in complete control of his universe. He'd arranged to meet her for lunch at a chic, discreet restaurant downtown. As he waited, he rehearsed the moment in his head. He saw it as a scene from a movie, the powerful executive entrusting his stunning, brilliant mistress with a key to his inner sanctum. It was romantic in a dangerous, corporate raider sort of way. Isabella arrived a vision in a form-fitting crimson dress that turned heads. She slid into the booth opposite him, her dark eyes sparkling with a familiar mix of ambition and desire. "You've been looking pleased with yourself all morning," she said, her voice a low purr. "Did that deal finally close?" "Something like that," Julian replied, unable to contain his smile. He reached into his pocket. "I have something for you." He slid the key across the polished mahogany table. It came to a stop near her wine glass. Isabella looked down at it, then back up at him, a flicker of genuine surprise on her face. "Julian, what is this?" "It's for the office," he said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "My office. For those nights when we're working late and want some privacy, or for a weekend when no one's around, so you don't have to wait for me downstairs or sign in. You can just come up. It's our place, remember?" Isabella picked up the key, her painted nails a stark red against the brass. A slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. This was more than a key. It was a promotion. It was a sign that she was moving from a temporary thrill to a permanent fixture in his life. It was leverage. "Julian," she breathed, her voice filled with exactly the awe he'd hoped for. "Are you sure?" "What if someone sees me?" "No one will," he said dismissively. "The weekend and night crew don't care, and who would question you? You're on my team. Besides," he added, his voice dropping, "I like the risk." He was so blinded by his own arrogance, so caught up in the drama he was creating, that he failed to see the cold calculation in her eyes. He saw admiration. She saw opportunity. Meanwhile, back in their brownstone, Amelia was dealing with a different kind of detail. She was on a video call with a man named Arthur Thompson. Arthur was in his late 60s, with a kind face etched with the lines of decades of responsibility. To the world, he was the formidable CEO of the Hayes Development Group, one of the largest commercial real estate firms in the country. To Amelia, he was the man who had raised her after her parents' death, her guardian, her confidant, and the steward of her family's vast, hidden fortune. The new security protocols for the tower are fully operational. Amelia, Arthur was saying, his voice a comforting baritone through the laptop speakers. Tier 1 access is now linked directly to biometric data for all primary stakeholders, and the alert system is streamlined. Any unauthorized access attempts or after-hours overrides on executive floors will trigger an instant silent notification to my office and your personal account. Amelia sighed, shifting to get more comfortable in her chair. Is all that really necessary, Arthur? It sounds so intense. Arthur's expression softened. Your father was a careful man, Amelia. He built an empire, and he knew that empires need protecting. You own that building lock, stock, and barrel. It's the crown jewel of your portfolio. We don't take chances with it. This was the great secret of Amelia's life. She wasn't a simple gallery worker. She was Amelia Hayes, the sole heir to the Hayes fortune. The Hayes Tower, where her husband proudly worked, was her building. When she'd met Julian, she'd been so tired of men who were only interested in her wealth. She wanted someone to love her, the quiet, art-loving woman she was at her core. Julian, with his fierce ambition and his apparent blindness to her background, seemed like the perfect man. He was building his own empire, he said. She loved that about him. She loved that he thought he was the provider, the one giving her a life of luxury. It had been their private romantic truth. She planned to tell him everything, of course. After the baby was born, it would be a new beginning for them all. I know, she said, smiling faintly. Thank you, Arthur, for everything, for always looking out for me. It's my honor, he replied. Now, have you told Julian yet about everything? Amelia shook her head, a familiar pang of guilt and apprehension surfacing. Not yet. The timing doesn't feel right. He's under so much pressure at work with this new deal. After the baby comes, then we'll have a whole new life to build together. With no secrets. Arthur nodded, though a shadow of concern crossed his face. He trusted Amelia's judgment, but he'd never been entirely convinced by Julian Croft. He found the man's ambition to be a little too sharp, his charm a little too polished, but he kept his reservations to himself for Amelia's sake. That Friday evening, Julian told Amelia he had to work late to finalize the deal. This is it, Ames. The final push. Don't wait up. He kissed her goodbye, the lie slipping off his tongue with practiced ease. Amelia, ever supportive, just smiled and wished him luck, her hand resting on her belly. Hours later, in his corner office on the 48th floor of the Hayes Tower, Julian wasn't closing a deal. He and Isabella were celebrating a fictional victory with a bottle of champagne he'd swiped from the company fridge. To us, Isabella said, raising her glass. And to new beginnings. To us, Julian echoed, clinking his glass against hers. Later, as they prepared to leave, Isabella held up the key he had given her. I'll let myself out. See you Monday, boss. The word boss was laced with a new intimate irony. Julian watched her go, a smug sense of satisfaction washing over him. He felt like the king of the world, standing in his castle, his beautiful mistress, holding the key. He had everything a man could want, and he was managing it all perfectly. He was completely, blissfully, and dangerously unaware that 3,000 miles away in a secure server room, the building's new security system was logging an anomaly, an executive-level office accessed after midnight using a newly minted manual key override. An override that triggered a silent red-flagged email. An email that was sent directly to Arthur Thompson. Arthur Thompson was a man of routine. Even on a Saturday morning, he was up by 5:30 a.m., sipping black coffee and reviewing overnight reports from his global portfolio on a tablet in his study. It was a habit forged over 40 years of managing the Hayes empire. He was methodical, patient, and missed nothing. As he scrolled through market summaries and construction updates, a single email in his priority inbox caught his eye. The subject line was stark and clinical. Security alert, manual key override, floor 48, the Hayes Tower. His brow furrowed. Manual overrides were a relic, a backup system that was almost never used, especially on the high-security executive floors. The new biometric system was supposed to make them obsolete. His first thought was a system glitch, a bug in the new software. He clicked open the email. Alert ID 774B1. Timestamp 02:17 a.m. Est location. The Hayes Tower floor, 48 office, 4812. Tenant Morgan and Finch, Capital. Assigned tenant. Julian Croft, SVP, Event Manual. Key override detected at primary office door. No corresponding biometric or keycard exit logged for J. Croft prior to event. Action logged. CCTV footage archived. Arthur sat back, the coffee forgotten. Office 4812. Julian Croft's office. An override at 2:17 a.m. It could be innocent. Julian could have forgotten his access card and had a spare key. But the system was designed to flag such inconsistencies. It was the lack of a corresponding exit log for Julian himself that was peculiar. It implied someone else had used a key, while the system still thought Julian was inside, or that Julian had left without swiping out and someone else had entered. It was messy. With a few taps, Arthur pulled up the secure CCTV portal. He navigated to the hallway cameras for the 48th floor timestamp 02:15 a.m. The footage was crisp high definition. He watched as Julian and a woman, a striking brunette in a red dress, exited the office together, laughing. Arthur's jaw tightened. He fast-forwarded. He saw them part ways at the elevator bank. He then rewound to the specific time of the alert. At precisely 02:17 a.m., the footage from the camera aimed directly at Julian's office door showed the woman Isabella Rossi returning alone. She looked both ways down the empty, silent corridor, then produced a key. She inserted it into the lock, opened the door, and slipped back inside Julian's office for a few moments, likely to retrieve a forgotten item before it exiting again and leaving for good. It wasn't the act itself that was damning. It was the key. Arthur knew for a fact that Morgan and Finch Capital's lease agreement stipulated a strict access protocol. All keys were numbered and assigned. Any request for a duplicate required a formal application to building management and the tenant's security officer, citing a valid reason. A new key for a junior analyst to access an SVP's office after hours would have been flagged instantly. This meant Julian had a key duplicated himself covertly. He had circumvented the building's security protocols. Amelia's security protocols. Arthur felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. This wasn't a simple case of an employee bending the rules. This was Julian Croft, the husband of the building's owner, acting with a level of arrogance that was staggering. He was treating Amelia's most valuable asset like his personal clubhouse. He saved a copy of the log and the encrypted video file. His duty was clear. His loyalty wasn't to Julian Croft or Morgan and Finch Capital. It was to Amelia. But how could he tell her? She was pregnant, happy, and completely in love with a man who was at best a reckless fool and at worst a cheating liar. The sight of Julian and the other woman laughing together on the footage left little doubt in Arthur's mind as to which it was. He wrestled with the decision all weekend. He could bury the report. It was a minor infraction, technically. But he knew this was just a symptom of a deeper problem. A man who was this careless with his professional life was likely just as flawless with his personal one. Protecting Amelia meant protecting her from the truth, but for how long deception like rot only grew in the dark. By Monday morning he knew what he had to do. He couldn't call her with this news. He couldn't send it in an email. This required delicacy. It required him to look her in the eye and be the rock she needed him to be when her world cracked. He called Amelia's personal assistant. "Please inform Mrs. Croft that I need to see her. It's a matter of some urgency regarding the family portfolio. I'll come to the house this afternoon." When Amelia received the message, she felt a flutter of anxiety. Arthur never made house calls unless it was serious. She immediately thought of a problem with one of their international properties, a market crash or a legal dispute. Her mind raced through a dozen business-related catastrophes. Not once did she consider that the catastrophe was already living in her home, sleeping in her bed. At 3:00 p.m., Arthur arrived. Amelia greeted him at the door, her hand on her belly. "Arthur, you look so serious. What's happened? Is everything all right? Let's sit down, my dear," he said, gently. His eyes filled with a pained sympathy that she didn't understand. They sat in the living room, a space filled with art and light. Arthur placed his tablet on the coffee table between them, but didn't turn it on. "Amelia," he began, his voice heavy, "I have something to show you. It's difficult, and I am so sorry that I am the one who has to bring this to you." He took a deep breath. "As you know, we installed a new security system at the tower. It flags any and all irregularities. On Saturday morning, we received an alert." He recounted the events clinically, the manual key override, the late-hour office 4812. Amelia listened, confused. Julian's office. Did he lose his key card? He can be so forgetful sometimes. Arthur's face was grim. It's more complicated than that. The system also captures CCTV footage. He turned the tablet towards her and pressed play. He didn't show her the footage of Julian and Isabella leaving together. He started with the digital ghost, the image of the empty, silent hallway, then the door to her husband's office opening, and Isabella Rossi, a woman Amelia had never seen before, stepping out a purse slung over her shoulder, a look of smug satisfaction on her face as she walked away. He then played the clip from earlier, the one showing her using a physical key to enter. Amelia stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process the image. Who? Who is that? Why does she have a key to Julian's office? Arthur's silence was the only answer she needed. The pieces began to click into place, each one a shard of ice in her heart. The late nights, the sudden business trips, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suit jacket that she'd dismissed as paranoia. The way he looked at his phone, a quick, secretive glance. The condescending way he explained that she wouldn't understand the pressures of his world. It wasn't pressure. It was a person. It was this person. She looked from the tablet to Arthur, her eyes wide with a dawning, shattering horror. The blood drained from her face. She felt the weight of her unborn child, a child conceived in love, and now caught in a web of deceit. The name on the building, her greatest secret, felt like a cruel joke. He had given another woman the key to a building he didn't even know his own wife owned. The sheer breathtaking arrogance of it was as painful as the betrayal itself. "Amelia," Arthur said softly, his voice full of concern. She didn't cry. Not yet. A cold, terrifying calm washed over her. The hurt was a deep physical chasm opening inside her. But on the surface, the gentle, trusting Amelia Hayes was being replaced by something else. Something harder. Something forged in the fire of her father's legacy. She was a Hayes, and no one, not even her husband, would make a fool of her in her own empire. She looked at Arthur, her gaze steady and clear. "Show me everything," she said, her voice devoid of its usual softness, replaced by the chilling quiet of steel. "Every log, every second of footage. I want to see it all." For the next hour, Amelia sat in silence as Arthur walked her through the digital trail of her husband's betrayal. She watched the full footage from Friday night, Julian and Isabella emerging from the office, their easy intimacy, the shared laughter that felt like a physical blow. She saw the log of the key override the timestamps, the cold, hard data that painted a picture of calculated deceit. The pain was immense, a tidal wave crashing against her heart. Every shared memory, every loving glance, every promise for the future was now tainted, recast in the harsh light of this new reality. The man she loved, the father of her child, was a stranger. Worse, he was a cliché, a cheating husband with a younger colleague. But the context of the betrayal elevated it from a mere personal tragedy to an act of monumental disrespect. He hadn't just cheated on her in a hotel. He had brought his affair into the heart of her family's legacy, the Hayes Tower, and used it as his personal playground. When Arthur was finished, Amelia finally looked up from the tablet. Her eyes were dry, but her face was a mask of grief and resolve. The initial shock had receded, replaced by a cold, quiet fury. This wasn't the fury of a scorned woman. It was the fury of a queen whose castle had been defiled. "He thinks I'm a fool," she whispered more to herself than to Arthur. "He thinks I'm this simple, naive girl who manages his home while he conquers the world. He has no idea whose world he's been living in." Arthur watched her, his expression a mixture of pity and pride. He saw the heartbroken young woman he'd raised, but he also saw the daughter of Robert Hayes, a man who had been brilliant, strategic, and utterly uncompromising when it came to his business and his family. "What do you want to do, Amelia?" he asked gently. "I can have building security revoke his access immediately. We can have a legal team draft a notice to Morgan and Finch about the security breach. We can change the locks on this house. You have every option." Amelia stood up and walked to the large window overlooking their manicured garden. She placed a protective hand on her belly. The baby kicked a small, innocent life, unaware of the storm that had just broken. That kick solidified something within her. This was no longer just about her own broken heart. It was about protecting her child's future, her child's legacy. A legacy Julian had just proven himself unworthy of. A confrontation was inevitable, but a simple tearful fight in their living room felt inadequate. It would give him the chance to lie, to gaslight her, to beg for forgiveness, and paint himself as the victim of a moment of weakness. No, the punishment had to fit the crime. His sin was one of arrogance committed on a stage of corporate power. His downfall would have to be just as public, just as corporate. He needed to understand the true scale of his mistake, the sheer magnitude of the world he had failed to see. She turned back to Arthur, her eyes glinting with a strategic fire he hadn't seen since her father was alive. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We do nothing. Not yet. I don't want him to know that we know. Let him continue to believe he's in control. Let him feel secure in his lies." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning, Amelia? He's been boasting about a big deal, something that's supposed to make his career," she said, a bitter irony in her voice. "He works for Morgan and Finch, but who is the other party in this deal?" "Let me check," Arthur said, already tapping on his tablet. He had access to financial networks and intel that rivaled intelligence agencies. A few moments later, he had the answer. "They're trying to broker a massive real estate acquisition, a portfolio of commercial properties from a European firm looking to divest its North American assets. The deal is being fronted by a private equity group, Blackwood Holdings." "Blackwood Holdings," Amelia repeated. "And this deal, is it going to happen in the Hayes Tower?" "It seems so," Arthur confirmed. "The final negotiations are scheduled for next Wednesday, in the main boardroom on the 50th floor, from what my sources say." A plan began to form in Amelia's mind, cold and precise. It was an architect's plan, designing not a building, but a man's complete and total deconstruction. "Arthur," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I own Blackwood Holdings, don't I? Through a subsidiary in Switzerland?" Arthur looked at her, and a slow smile of understanding spread across his face. "Yes, you do. It's one of your most discreet assets. No one connects it back to Hayes Development." "Good," Amelia said. "Then we are going to let Julian walk into that meeting. We're going to let him prepare his pitch and feel like he's on top of the world. He's going to walk into that boardroom next Wednesday, expecting to meet the anonymous executives of Blackwood Holdings." She paused, taking a deep breath. "And who he's going to find is us." The strategy was audacious, ruthless even, but Amelia felt a strange sense of clarity. Julian had created a fantasy world where he was the king. She would simply force him to see the reality that he was a tenant in her castle, a castle he was about to be evicted from in the most humiliating way imaginable. "There's more," she said. "I want to know everything about this woman, Isabella Rossi. Her employment history, her performance, reviews her role in this deal. I want to know if this is just an affair or if it's corporate espionage. Is she using him for information? Is she a risk to the company? To my building's tenants? I'll have a full dossier on your desk by morning," Arthur promised, his voice filled with admiration for the woman she was becoming in this crucible of pain. For the next week, Amelia played the part of the devoted, expectant wife. It was the most difficult performance of her life. She smiled when Julian boasted about the final details of his deal. She packed him healthy lunches, she asked about his day, and listened to his casual lies with a placid expression that betrayed none of the turmoil within. Each lie he told, each moment of feigned affection, was another nail in the coffin he was building for himself. Julian, consumed by his own ego and the thrill of his affair, noticed nothing. He saw Amelia's quiet support as his due her pregnancy, as a testament to the perfect life he had built. He was more confident than ever on the cusp of the biggest achievement of his career. He felt invincible. On the Tuesday night before the big meeting, he came home late, buzzing with energy. "Tomorrow is the day, Ames," he announced, kissing her cheek. After tomorrow, everything changes. I'll finally get the recognition I deserve. Maybe even a full partnership." Amelia forced a smile, her heart a block of ice. "I'm so proud of you, Julian," she said, her voice even. "You deserve all the success in the world." He beamed, completely oblivious to the double meaning in her words. "I know," he said. "It's about time everyone else did too." He went to sleep that night, dreaming of victory and applause. Amelia lay awake beside him, her hand on her belly, thinking of the cold, quiet boardroom on the 50th floor and the justice that was waiting for him there. Wednesday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of sharp, sunny day that made the glass skin of the Hayes Tower glitter like a shard of diamond. For Julian Croft, it felt like the world was laying out a red carpet just for him. He chose his most expensive suit, a navy brioni, and the tie Amelia had given him for his last birthday, a silk zegna. It was his power uniform. As he knotted the tie, he caught his reflection in the mirror. He saw a titan of industry, a man on the precipice of greatness. "Wish me luck," he said to Amelia, giving her a quick, distracted kiss. He barely noticed the stillness in her eyes, the almost imperceptible lack of warmth in her touch. His mind was already on the 50th floor. "You won't need it," she replied, her voice eerily calm. "I have a feeling you're going to get exactly what's coming to you." He laughed, taking it as a vote of confidence. "That's the spirit I'll call you the second it's over. We'll celebrate tonight. The best restaurant in town. Nothing but the best for my family." He left without a backward glance. Amelia stood motionless in the hallway for a full minute after the door clicked shut. Then she walked calmly to her own car, a discreet but powerful sedan he never paid much attention to, and drove towards the city. She had her own meeting to attend. Julian arrived at the Hayes Tower, feeling like its conquering hero. He strode through the lobby, giving a curt nod to the security guards. He took the express elevator directly to the 50th floor home, to the building's most luxurious and exclusive boardrooms, reserved for tenants of unparalleled importance. His team was already there, buzzing with nervous energy, everyone except Isabella. She was to join them in the presentation, a reward for her hard work. "Where's Rossi?" Julian asked David Chen, his second in command. "Said she was grabbing something and would meet us in the room," David replied, shuffling through his presentation notes. "You ready for this, Julian? The guys from Blackwood are supposed to be legends, utter sharks." "Let them be sharks," Julian said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "We're about to give them a deal they can't refuse. I've got this." At precisely 10:30 a.m., a secretary from building management informed them that the Blackwood Holdings representatives were ready. Julian straightened his tie, shot his cuffs, and led his team towards the main boardroom. The door was a towering slab of dark mahogany. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment that would define his career. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, and stopped dead. The room was vast, with a 30-foot-long table made of a single piece of polished granite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Manhattan. But Julian didn't see the view. He saw the people at the table. At the head of the table sat Arthur Thompson, his face impassive and cold as stone. To his right sat two grim-faced lawyers, Julian recognized as being from one of the most feared corporate law firms in the city. And to Arthur's left, sitting with a posture of perfect regal calm, was his wife Amelia. She wasn't the soft, unassuming Amelia he had left at home that morning. She was wearing a bespoke maternity business dress in a deep navy blue that mirrored his own suit, her hair styled immaculately. Her expression was one he had never seen before, calm, powerful, and utterly devoid of affection. She looked at him not as a husband, but as a stranger she was about to dismiss. Julian's mind reeled in confusion. He blinked, thinking he was hallucinating. "Amelia, what are you doing here? And Mr. Thompson, is this some kind of surprise?" His voice faltered. His team standing behind him was equally bewildered, shuffling their feet in awkward silence. Amelia didn't answer. She simply gestured to the empty chairs on the other side of the table. "Please, Julian, sit. We have a lot to discuss." Her voice was the voice of a CEO, not a wife. Cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into Julian's veins. He looked from Amelia's unreadable face to Arthur's granite-like stare. He slowly walked to the indicated chair and sat down his own presentation notes, feeling suddenly ridiculous in his hands. I don't understand," he stammered. "We were scheduled to meet with Blackwood Holdings." "You are," Arthur Thompson stated, his voice cutting through the silent room. "You are meeting with the sole proprietor of Blackwood Holdings and the beneficial owner of this building, the Hayes Tower." He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. "Mrs. Amelia Hayes Croft." The name hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. Julian's world tilted on its axis. The blood rushed from his head, and the panoramic view outside seemed to sensual Amelia's culpa. Owned the Hayes Tower, owned Blackwood Holdings. It was impossible. It was a joke. He looked at her, searching for the punchline, for the gentle smile of his sweet, simple wife. All he found was the cool, appraising gaze of an owner, a proprietor, a woman who held his entire world in the palm of her hand. The condescending affection he'd always shown her, the assumption of her naivete, the belief in his own superiority. It all crashed down on him with the force of a physical impact. He had been living in a fool's paradise. Just as the crushing weight of this revelation was settling in, the boardroom door opened again. Isabella Rossi walked in, a confident smile on her face. "Sorry I'm late, Julian. I was just—" She stopped, her smile vanishing as she took in the scene. She saw Julian, pale and stricken. She saw the powerful figures at the head of the table. And she saw Amelia, pregnant and poised, looking directly at her with an unnerving stillness. Isabella's ambition had always been her greatest asset. But for the first time, her instinct screamed at her that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Amelia's gaze shifted from Julian to Isabella, her eyes turning from ice to Arctic frost. "Ms. Rossi," Amelia said, her voice dangerously soft. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat. We were just about to discuss your contributions to the company." The trap had been sprung. The players were all in place, and Julian Croft was about to learn the true meaning of consequences. Isabella froze in the doorway, her bravado evaporating under Amelia's glacial stare. She looked at Julian for guidance, but he was a statue of shock, his face ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief. The power dynamic in the room was palpable and terrifyingly clear. She slowly, cautiously took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from Amelia as possible. Amelia let the silence stretch, a tool of power she wielded with devastating precision. She watched Julian's mind work, saw the denial warring with the horrifying emerging truth. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm and measured each word, a carefully placed stone building the walls of his new prison. "For 3 years, Julian Muth, I have honored your ambition. I have watched you work yourself to the bone, because you wanted to build something for us, for our family. I respected it so much that I kept my own life, my own inheritance, a secret. I wanted you to love me, Amelia. Not Amelia Hayes, the owner of a real estate empire. She paused, letting that sink in. I wanted to believe you were the man I fell in love with. A man of integrity. A man of honor. She gestured to Arthur. But it seems I was mistaken. Arthur Thompson slid a sleek silver tablet to the center of the table and tapped the screen. A high-definition video began to play on the large monitor mounted on the wall. It was the CCTV footage from the 48th floor hallway. Julian and Isabella exiting his office after hours, their body language intimate and undeniable. Julian flinched as if he'd been struck. His team members shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the screen and their now disgraced boss. This was Friday night, Arthur stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Or rather, Saturday morning at 2:05 a.m. Well, after any professional obligation had concluded. He swiped the screen. A new video played. It was Isabella returning alone, using the key Julian had given her to re-enter his office. And this, Arthur continued, is the security breach. An unauthorized key created without protocol used to access a secure executive office. A key we discovered you had duplicated at a hardware store on 6th Avenue last Tuesday, paid for in cash. The level of detail was staggering. Julian felt a wave of nausea. They knew everything. Amelia's eyes now fixed on Isabella, who had shrunk in her chair, all her practiced corporate confidence gone. Ms. Rossi, my team completed a full review of your work history and digital footprint last weekend. It was illuminating. It showed a pattern of forming close relationships with male superiors, followed by rapid, often undeserved promotions. But this time, you overplayed your hand. One of the lawyers spoke for the first time, his voice a dry rustle of paper. Your employment contract with Morgan & Finch, Miss Rossi, contains a standard but strict non-fraternization clause for direct superiors and subordinates, as well as a corporate espionage clause. By accepting a key to a senior vice president's office containing sensitive client data, you have violated both. You are being terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building to collect your personal effects. You will find your career on Wall Street is effectively over. Isabella's face went white. She opened her mouth to speak, to protest, but no words came out. The life she had been so carefully constructing had just been demolished in under a minute. Two uniformed security guards who had been waiting discreetly outside entered the room. They stood on either side of her chair. Without a word, a defeated Isabella Rossi stood up and was escorted out of the boardroom, out of the company, and out of Julian's life. Julian watched her go, but his focus was entirely on Amelia. The affair felt like a distant, stupid mistake now. The real cataclysm was the woman sitting across from him. A woman he thought he knew, who was now a complete and terrifying stranger. Amelia, please. He finally choked out the words, tasting like ash. I can explain. It was a mistake. A terrible, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. I love you. Amelia let out a short, sharp sound that was devoid of humor. Love, don't you dare use that word in this room. You didn't just have an affair, Julian. You disrespected me in the most profound way possible. You used my home, my legacy as the backdrop for your sordid little drama. You patronized me. You lied to me every single day. You looked at me and our unborn child and saw nothing but a pretty simple accessory to the life you thought you were building. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with a righteous fire. Let me be clear about the life you were living. The down payment on our brownstone, it came from a trust I control. The amazing investment opportunities your friends gave you early in your career. Those were opportunities my associates discreetly pushed your way to give you a hand up. Your membership at the country club. My father's name is on the founder's plaque. I didn't give you a life of luxury, Julian. I gave you a chance to be a good man on your own terms. And you failed. Each word was a hammer blow, systematically dismantling the entire foundation of his identity. His success, his hard work, his empire, it was all a curated illusion. He hadn't built anything. He had been a guest in a kingdom he didn't even know existed. He looked at the stunned faces of his team, the men who had admired and envied him. He saw their pity and contempt. His humiliation was absolute, a crushing physical weight. As for Morgan and Finch, Arthur Thompson interjected coldly, we, as the owners of this building and a significant, albeit silent investor in your firm, through various funds, have already spoken to the board. Your flagrant breach of security protocols, your disregard for company policy, and the potential liability you've created are untenable. Your position has been terminated. It was over. In the space of 10 minutes he had lost his job, his career, his mistress, and his dignity. All that was left was his wife. He looked at Amelia, his eyes pleading, desperate. Ames, our baby, our son. Please. Don't do this to us. I can fix this. We can fix this. Amelia stood up, her pregnancy making the movement slow and deliberate. She looked down at him not with hatred, but with a profound and sorrowful finality. There is no us to fix, Julian. There is only you and the consequences of your choices. And there is me and the responsibility I have to protect my son from a father who has proven he understands nothing of loyalty, honor, or respect. She walked towards the door, pausing beside his chair. The lawyers will be in touch regarding the divorce. I expect you to be out of my house by the end of the day. Your belongings will be packed and sent to a storage unit. She didn't look back. Arthur Thompson and the lawyers followed her, leaving Julian alone in the vast, silent boardroom with the ruins of his life scattered around him. He stared at his own reflection in the polished granite table, but he didn't recognize the man staring back. 6 months later, the autumn chill had given way to the biting cold of a New York winter. Snow dusted the sills of the panoramic windows in the corner office on the 50th floor of the Hayes Tower. It was no longer a boardroom, but had been renovated into a magnificent, light-filled executive suite. The new CEO of Hayes Development Group, Amelia Hayes, stood looking out at the city skyline, her city. In her arms, she held her 2-month-old son, Noah Hayes. She had given him her name, the name of his true legacy. The woman who looked out at the city was not the same one from a year ago. The soft edges had been honed by grief and responsibility into a quiet, formidable strength. She had embraced her identity, not as a burden to be hidden, but as a duty to be honored. She moved with a confidence that came from surviving the worst kind of betrayal and discovering that she was more than enough on her own. The pain was still there, a faint scar on her heart, but it no longer defined her. Noah did. Her work did. Her future did. Arthur Thompson entered the office, his usual stern expression softened by the sight of Amelia and her son. The final quarter projections are in, he said gently. We're up 12%. Your strategy for the Blackwood portfolio is already paying dividends. Good, Amelia replied, her voice calm and assured. What about the Morgan and Finch tenancy? Their lease is up for renewal in 8 months, Arthur said. They are, shall we say, very eager to remain in our good graces. They promoted David Chen to senior vice president. He's competent. Amelia nodded. Ensure the new lease reflects current market rates. No special treatment. There was no malice in her voice, only the dispassionate clarity of a good business owner. Her life had found a new, powerful rhythm. It was a life of board meetings and bedtime stories of market analysis and baby laughter. She was proving to be a natural leader, possessing her father's strategic mind, but with a compassion and modern perspective that was all her own. Across town, in a small, nondescript apartment in Queens, Julian Croft was trying to piece together a life. The word had spread quickly through the tight-knit world of New York finance. He was radioactive. No major firm would touch him. The story of his public humiliation in the Hayes Tower had become a cautionary tale whispered over expensive lunches. He had eventually found a low-level analyst job at a small, struggling firm in New Jersey, the kind of place he would have sneered at a year ago. His tailored suits were replaced by off-the-rack substitutes. The Patek Philippe was long gone, sold to cover legal fees and rent. He took the subway to work every day, just another face in the anonymous crowd. The loss of wealth and status was crushing, but what haunted him most was the loss of his family. He had received a single formal photograph of his son, Noah, from Amelia's lawyers. He kept it on his nightstand. The baby had his eyes. The pain of that knowledge was a constant, dull ache. He had lost the right to be a father before he even had a chance to be one. He finally understood what he had thrown away. It wasn't just the money or the lifestyle. It was Amelia. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in him, her love that he had been too arrogant and too stupid to see for what it was, a gift, not a given. He had been handed a kingdom, and in his blindness had chosen to play games in the stables with a court jester. The key he so smugly gave to Isabella wasn't a key to power. It was the key that had unlocked his own self-destruction. One evening as he rode the train home, he looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. In the distance, the Hayes Tower stood tall and defiant, its lights glittering against the twilight sky. He imagined Amelia up there in her rightful place, looking out over the world with their son in her arms. She was at the top where she belonged, and he was down here in the darkness, looking up at everything he had lost. It wasn't a punishment. It was, he finally realized, simply the natural order of things reasserting itself. The story of Julian and Amelia is a powerful and raw reminder of the nature of consequences. It shows us that true strength isn't about the power you project, but the integrity you possess. Julian's arrogance and deceit built a house of cards that was destined to collapse, while Amelia, in the face of devastating betrayal, found a deeper strength she never knew she had. She didn't just reclaim her power. She defined it on her own terms for herself and for her child. Their story teaches us that secrets can be corrosive, and the truth, no matter how painful, is always the foundation for a new beginning. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of storytelling to reveal the complexities of life, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you compelling real-life dramas every week that explore the choices that make us and break us. Thank you for listening.